Dolly Parton was just 21 years old when she walked onto the set of the Porter Wagoner Show in 1967. Nervous, shy, but burning with ambition, she was stepping into a world that would change her life forever. Porter Wagoner, already a household name in country music with his flashy rhinestone suits and successful television program, had just lost his longtime co-star, Norma Jean. He needed a replacement, and Dolly was chosen for the role. At first, not everyone was happy about it. Fans of the show had grown attached to Norma Jean, and some even wrote angry letters demanding her return. Dolly felt the sting of rejection, but she didn't let it crush her. Week after week, she stood on that stage and sang her heart out. Slowly, the audience began to see what Porter must have seen in her. This tiny young woman with a huge voice, a radiant smile, and a personality too big to ignore. The magic between them was undeniable. Their voices blended so perfectly that it seemed almost supernatural, as if they had been singing together their whole lives. Songs like "The Last Thing on My Mind" and "Please Don't Stop Loving Me" became hits, not just because of the lyrics, but because of the chemistry between the two singers. On stage, they laughed, teased, and shared a warmth that audiences believed was real. To viewers, they looked like the perfect musical duo, maybe even something more. But behind the curtain, the story was much more complicated. Porter was proud of Dolly and constantly reminded people that he had discovered her. He introduced her as "my girl" and took credit for her success, which bothered Dolly. She respected him deeply and felt grateful for the platform he had given her. But she also knew she wasn't destined to live in anyone's shadow. Even then, she had a vision of herself as an artist who could stand alone. Porter, however, didn't want to let her go. The more Dolly's fame grew, the more possessive he became. He wanted control over her songs, her career decisions, and even how she presented herself. To Porter, Dolly was his protégé, and he was determined to keep her close. But to Dolly, Porter's controlling nature was beginning to feel like a cage. By the early 1970s, Dolly was receiving awards, her fan base was exploding, and people tuned in as much for her as for Porter. She was becoming a star in her own right. That success thrilled Porter on one hand, but terrified him on the other. He knew that if Dolly kept rising, she might outgrow him, and if she outgrew him, she might walk away. The tension between them grew unbearable. Arguments became frequent, not just about business, but about creative control and independence. Dolly realized she had to make the hardest decision of her life. She loved Porter, respected him, and owed him so much. But if she stayed, she would never become the artist she knew she could be. When words failed her, Dolly turned to the one thing that had always guided her music. Late one night, she picked up her guitar and poured her soul into a song. The result was, "I Will Always Love You." It wasn't written for a boyfriend or a lover. It was written for Porter. Every word was her way of saying goodbye, of thanking him for what he had done while making it clear she had to go her own way. When she sang the song for Porter, he was stunned. He told her it was the best song she had ever written. But his pride couldn't accept her decision. He didn't want her to leave, and when she did in 1974, it broke him. Dolly herself admitted she cried for weeks after walking away, but she knew it was the only way forward. Her solo career took off almost immediately. She became the Dolly Parton the world knows today, with hits like Jolene and 9 to 5. But Porter couldn't let go of his bitterness. His pride turned into anger, and soon after, he filed a lawsuit against her, claiming she owed him millions of dollars for breaking contracts. For Dolly, it was like being stabbed in the back. She had loved Porter, looked up to him, and written him a song that became one of the greatest farewells in music history. Now, the man she respected was dragging her into court. The lawsuit was eventually settled out of court, but the scars ran deep. Dolly never spoke ill of Porter in public. She continued to show grace, saying only kind things about him even while he criticized her. But behind the scenes, their relationship was shattered. For nearly 2 decades, they barely spoke. Time, however, has a way of changing things. As Porter grew older, his health began to fail. His once bright career had dimmed, and his larger-than-life personality was fading. When Dolly heard he was sick, she didn't hesitate. Despite everything, she returned to his side. Quietly, without cameras or publicity, she visited him in the hospital, helped with medical expenses, and reminded him of the good times they had shared. In those final months, something beautiful happened. The bitterness melted away, replaced by forgiveness. Porter allowed himself to acknowledge what Dolly had meant to him, and Dolly found peace in offering kindness instead of resentment. It wasn't about the past anymore. It was about love, the kind that survives even betrayal and heartbreak. When Porter Wagoner passed away in October of 2007 at the age of 80, Dolly was devastated. At his funeral, she stood before his casket and whispered a private goodbye. Then, with tears streaming down her face, she sang one last song for him. Her voice carried every ounce of pain, gratitude, and forgiveness she had held onto all those years. It was a farewell not just to Porter, but to the chapter of her life that he had defined. Years later, as she approached 79, Dolly finally spoke openly about what Porter had meant to her. She admitted that leaving him had been the hardest decision of her life. She confessed that the lawsuit nearly destroyed her memory of him. But she also said that forgiveness had healed what pride once broke. She told fans that Porter was both the best and the hardest thing that ever happened to her. He broke her heart, but he also gave her the chance to become who she was always meant to be. In her words, without Porter Wagoner, there would be no Dolly Parton as you know her today. She chose to remember him not as the man who sued her or tried to control her, but as the man who gave her the platform to shine, who believed in her before the world did, and who helped shape her journey to stardom. Their story was never simple. It was not a tale of a perfect friendship or a perfect partnership. It was a story of two people bound by music, by ambition, and by a bond that survived the storms of betrayal and pride.